this space called Muscatine County, we're caretakers with an obligation to current and future generations. The land in and around Muscatine was formed by a glacier more than 300,000 years ago, and during the millennia in between, a critical story exists of environmental change, indigenous settlement, and forced removal, agriculture, philanthropy, and learning. This meeting takes place on the ancestral homelands of Native American nations to whom we owe our commitment and dedication. We respectfully recognize the area of Muscatine County was within the homelands of the Sauk, Fox, Iowa, and Oto. These nations were some of the first custodians of this land. Recognizing the connection of this history to the present reminds us of our current role as stewards of Muscatine County. As you explore our environmental topics, I hope you will find today's events motivating and engaging. Enjoy the morning, and I'll turn the mic over to Zach Spurstrad now.
Thank you so much. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Spierstead. I teach biology and environmental science here at Muscatine Community College. So today we have a lineup of speakers for our main session to talk to you about various topics. So that will run until about 11:10, after which we will transition over to Larson Hall, which is just east of this building. If you look out those windows, it's the next building over. So we're going to have a little breakout sessions for about 20 minutes. We'll return to this room and start our main session again about 11:45, just to go over what we talked about in our breakout session. So I'll remind you about this as we get to that point. But our first speaker today is going to be Chuck Prill, talking to us about electric vehicles. And I will have flashcards up here to warn or to notify the speakers when their time is approaching, so that we can keep moving on with new speakers.
Thank you. I guess I better first start with my disclaimer. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm just going to share with you some experiences I have as an EV owner. Is this working very well? Okay. All right. I'll use my teacher voice, I guess. We purchased our first EV about a year and a half ago. We have a 2021 Chevy Bolt. Since that 18 months, I've put about 35,000 miles on my car. So I'm a pretty high user, a high mileage driver. I think maybe the best I could do is share questions I've had and comments over the last year and a half. One of the ladies in church asked me, "Can you drive that on the highway?" And I said, "Yes, it's a real car. I've got an accelerator, I have brakes, I have airbags, seat belts, heater, and air conditioning too. So it's just drives just like a regular car." I say there are a couple things that are different. It's very quiet. There's no engine noise. There's no engine vibration. And if you've ever driven an electric car, they really accelerate. You don't have to worry about it merging onto the expressway or trying to pass another car. You have all the power you want, so that's really terrific. Our car sits up a little bit higher because our battery pack's underneath the floor. My wife really likes that because she can see a lot easier out of it, so that's one of the other things. I guess the biggest question and comment I get is range and charging of my car. My Bolt has a 250-mile range on a full battery charge. I drive about 85 to 90 miles daily to and from the Quad Cities. So the 250-mile range is really plenty for me. I don't ever worry about running out of electricity or running out of gas. Charging, I tell people it's like your Fitbit or your cell phone. You charge it every day, you plug it in, you charge it every day. Same for me in my car. I back my car into my garage. I have a level 2 charger, which is off a 220 volt. I plug it in. Next morning I get up, I have 250-mile range again. So I never really have any fear about range or running out of electricity. I guess maybe the next question I get is cost. And that's kind of double-sided question. The initial cost is higher. Electric cars cost more, but the operating costs are so much less. There's very little maintenance. There's no oil changes, no tune-ups. My car gets about 4.5 miles on a kilowatt of electricity. And a kilowatt Muscatine MPW is about 10 cents. So about a 100-mile range for me is $2.50. So if you want to compare that to your gasoline car, it's about a fourth of the cost for me to drive it. I'm lucky because my car gives me a monthly printout of how I've been driving. And it tells me last month that I drove 1,583 miles. I used 24 kilowatts of electricity. My miles per gallon equivalent is 139 miles per gallon. So electricity comparable to a gallon of gas, I get 139 miles on my car. But the big thing is, driving it, I eliminated 1,355 pounds of CO2 last month. So if I work that over the course of 18 months, close to 10 tons of CO2 emissions that I did not put into our environment. And that's a big issue. I could talk a lot longer. There's a lot of changes. Oh, 2 minutes, thank you. There's a lot of changes coming up. Last month's Car and Driver magazine, the September issue is their EV issue, which gives terminology, and they road test cars. Well, a year ago, they tested 11 cars. Electric cars are available in our area, in the United States. This year, last September, it was 31 cars. Shows you how many changes are coming. Oh, about every week or I read something new about electric cars or the charging or batteries, some new thing that's come out, how batteries charge faster, the range is longer. I read about public charging stations being added. I think Shell convenience stores are going to add 500 charging stations. The city of Chicago is adding into their building code required of charging stations to be in their parking lots. So things are changing. I got 1 minute left, so I guess I'm going to go up to my end here. Don't be afraid of an electric car. It's fun to drive. It just drives like every other car. It's been a real experience for me and a much cost-saving thing. I tell people I plug my car in, charge it every night. It's just like having a gas pump in your garage. It's just there. I guess a quick question from anyone? All right, then I did my thing. Thank you.
Let me tell you, as a teacher, 7 minutes goes by very quickly. So up next, we have Pam Joslin to talk to us about organic recycling.
How's that work?
You should just have to push on the right-hand side and it should transition. There you go. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Very much.
All right. So, hi. I am. Will this pick up without the mic, or can I use my teacher voice?
I think right now we're just using teacher voice, but I think that we're having a hard time following.
Okay, sounds good.
Could you hold it?
It'll be good.
Try holding it.
All right, so I guess if you just speak closer to the mic, it should function well.
All right. All right. Hi, my name is Pam Joslin, and I am a teacher here in the school district for the last 22 years. Currently, I'm at Susan Clark Junior High, and last year I did a project with my students called Forging Community Partnerships to Reduce Organic Waste. Let's see. I'm on the struggle bus.
Just the right-hand side.
Oh, great. So the goal of the project was to encourage students to engage in community partnerships, to promote student learning, to provide strategies to increase science literacy through socio-scientific issues, and then to provide an inclusive culture through student agency. So what I did is I asked Dr. DeWinter, hey, can you help me out and give me an idea for a problem? And I thought plastics was the way to go. And she's like, no. And it was awesome because she said, you should go to organic waste. We've got this great facility here in town with John Cook, and you two should connect. And so I was like incredibly grateful. So I looked into that, and I realized that we have 48 landfills in the state of Iowa containing about 56,273 square miles of land. And within those landfills, we produce a lot of methane due to organic waste and human activity with that. So organic waste contributes up to about 30% of the landfill waste where methane is produced. The big thing about methane is it's 80 times stronger in heating than CO2. So one simple thing that we could do is how do we reduce our food waste within our own household and our own community? And I look to how can I do it within the schools? So I'm not going to show this video just because I'm limited to my 7 minutes, but John Cook was instrumental in helping us do that, and John's right over there. He's an incredible guy. And we went over to the Mork facility, and what the students could do is they got to see how the depackaging can actually work with the machine and how it forces all of the food waste or that organic waste, and then they ship it over to the digester at the water treatment plant. So I took the students, or here's the video, I'm not going to show that like I said, but I took the students over to the Mork facility. They really liked the idea of a field trip. They hadn't had one for probably the last 3 years due to the Rona, so they were super excited about that, but they didn't like the smell. And so, sorry, John. So we also looked at heating values. So natural gas has 1,000 BTU per cubic feet, and biogas from organic waste has only about 600 BTU per cubic feet. But it's a lot cheaper, and we can still heat a lot of homes that way. So we could look at like how much the heating value is just simply from using organic waste. And John gave me a couple numbers, like back in 2012 when we didn't have the Mork facility, you can see that maybe that value could have heated 19 homes, whereas in March of 2022, that would be the equivalent of 204 homes. So I got a couple grants, and John has a bucket over there. I have one at my table. But I got every student in my class a bucket so that they could start collecting food waste at home. And when we did that, we looked at our own data, and I had them look at data. They're like, you're kidding me. You want me to take pictures of my food waste? I'm like, yes, I want you to take pictures of your food waste. Yes, it's disgusting. Yes, it smells. But it gets you an idea of like, how much are you collecting? I have students who have food scales at home, but most don't. So I said, please use a different way so we can measure volume, so you could measure it in that capacity. And then I want a reflection upon that piece as well. So some of them said, well, my family doesn't really waste food. We can't afford that. And I'm like, that's great. But I got them thinking about it. Or this week we didn't do a very good job. And I'm like, that's great. I wasn't into really changing anybody's habits per se, but really getting them to think about it, because human nature, it's hard to change. And so just when we think about that as a whole capacity, I wanted them to look at those themes though. And so what can we do to really make a difference? They surveyed the cooks, and many students complain about the food that they eat at school. They don't really always like it, but it got them thinking about what are the rules, what are the laws, what are the regulations that allow for that food that is served to them as well. And then what they learned, the key thing is that in our school, with just 2 grades and about 735 students, we throw 26 bags away of 30-gallon bags of garbage every single day. And so that's a lot. And then another 5 if you count breakfast. So what we did is like, well, what does that mean? we can give numbers to people, but what does that really mean? So the students calculated that out, and that covers the football field about 4 times over the course of a year. That's a lot of garbage just from a junior high. So we made informational slides and put those up and tried to get students like entertained in the idea that organic waste can be or is important. The students created a video and they showed that to every single science class. And then for a week we collected that food waste in the building. So over the course of 3 days we had 138 pounds of food waste was collected in just those 3 days last May. So right now we're continuing to collaborate with the city of Muscatine, and we're getting going. We're a little slow going this year to get that food waste going, but we're up and at it again slowly. We're trying to monitor the amount of food waste that we're doing within the building, and then trying to calculate the amount of food waste or that reduction that we can do as well. I've got an environmental club going. They are the most quirky, wonderful little people that meet with me on Tuesdays before or after school. They have already said some students aren't doing a very good job of food waste, and I'm like, well, what can we do? And they're like, we can have a poster contest. So next week they're starting off with their poster contest. They're trying to encourage people, and they know that young people like food. So they're going to reward the pizza party to the group that comes up with the poster for that. So they're trying to incentivize it. And then they're just really a fun group of students. We're calling ourselves Ecolution Evolution. And so we're just going strong and going from there, but that's kind of what we're doing, and there's a lot of power with really young people. They're beautiful and they're a lot of fun. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much. That gives me some good ideas for my environmental science classes. All right, so next we have Angela Woodhouse, who's going to be presenting a presentation called Eat Your Veggies.
I'm here to talk to you about how the impact of what we eat directly affects our carbon emissions. Louder? Sorry. I'll talk a little. Plant diets offer great potential for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse emissions might be decreased by 35% by replacing half of all animal-based meals with vegan diets. Even switching one animal product would have a significant impact on our climate goals. If you want to be full-fledged vegan or just go vegetarian or simply want to replace one meal, a couple meals a week, you can eliminate animal products and have an impact on our environment. Researchers from Loma Linda University in California found that vegans have the smallest carbon footprint, generating a 41.7% volume of greenhouse gases than meat eaters do. Research also shows that meat and dairy products are fueling the climate crisis, while plant-based diets focused on fruits, vegetables, grains, and beans help protect the planet. Another way to help the planet is to buy locally sourced foods from places like farmers markets and stores that purchase from local area producers. Planting a vegetable garden is another fun thing you can do to reap the benefits and help our planet. To give you a little bit of my background, my husband and I have been vegan since 2008. I used to teach plant-based cooking courses at Hy-Vee for about 7 years when the city of Muscatine introduced the Blue Zones project. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we were forced to end these classes. I have a certificate in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University and a plant-based cooking certificate from Ruby School, which is the largest online cooking school in the world. I have developed newparadigmhealthcookery.com, 200 plant-based recipes and resources if you're interested in plant-based nutrition and health. Another fantastic resource is Forks Over Knives app, magazine, and their documentary. Not only can you make improvements to our climate crisis, but you can dramatically improve your health at the same time, in addition to having a significant impact on your carbon footprint. There are many remarkable health benefits to switching to a plant-based diet. Did you know you can actually prevent and reverse heart disease by eating a whole food plant-based diet? This is a great way to eat, and you would likely find this way of eating to be delicious, satisfying, and nutritious. Simply by just making a few changes in a recipe, you can easily enjoy all your favorite dishes without any animal products. We don't live on salad alone. Plant-based eating has become more and more popular. It's very easy to find plant-based recipes and easy to try new dishes at home. Eating out at restaurants has also become very easy for vegans anymore. If an entree is not offered, oftentimes a couple of side dishes can be just as satisfying. A veggie pizza without cheese is absolutely fantastic. So I made a plant-based soup. It's my power chili, and the recipe is on my website if you like it and want to try it out. The soup is back on the refreshment table, and you're welcome to try some of that. I'm going to quick do a demonstration today of a Buddha bowl. A Buddha bowl is an easy one-bowl dish filled with colorful vegetables, grains, fruits, nuts, or seeds. Remember, the more colorful your food is, the healthier it is for you. So fill your Buddha bowl with a mixture of color, crunchy vegetables, and textures. The more interesting the dish is, the more satisfied you will be. Starches are your friend when eating this way. This dish can be adapted to whatever you have in your fridge and pantry. Be flexible with recipes and swap out what you like, and you'll be more apt to stick with it. So let me just quick throw this together. I'll try to talk loud. I know my voice isn't super loud. So today I'm just going to use some different mixed greens that I picked up. So I've got some mixed spinach and mixed greens here. So I'm going to put in the bowl. Well, I guess we'll just fill it all out. And I like arugula a lot. It's kind of a peppery flavor, so it adds a little more depth to your greens. So we'll just kind of mix that in. And then I'm going to start out with the whole grain. And this is quinoa, which is really quick and easy to use. And I like to just kind of, this is actually like a exaggerated Buddha bowl because it's going to, normally I don't make it this big. You just need to make enough for your plate. And usually I serve it on like a pasta bowl. And then these are some roasted potatoes I made the night before, and I just used a steak seasoning salt, believe it or not, that's got a lot of flavor. And I just went ahead, and you just want to kind of make clumps of what you like. And just to make things simplified, I have a can of garbanzo beans. Typically, I buy salt-free or reduced sodium. I'm going to just stick some of those in here. I've got some olives, Kalamata olives that are sliced. So we'll put some of those over here. And I've got some nice, beautiful, crunchy vegetables. I've got some yellow peppers, and it's okay to make larger pieces because you can, you know, pick them up with your fingers. That's okay with a Buddha bowl. Got some red and yellow, or orange and yellow, sorry, I do know my colors. And then I've got some really pretty multicolored carrots that we're going to add. Just add a little bit of that to the bowl. And again, just use what you have and what you like. If there's something you don't like, you don't need to use it. And then what I really like are these beautiful watermelon radishes. So we'll just put some of those in the center. They're just really pretty. Sometimes those can be hard to find. Here's some kind of strawberry colored ones. I'll put some of those in there. And then I've got some beets, and these are pickled beets that I made. So basically these just have, I cook the beets and then I use apple cider vinegar, some honey, and some garlic. So as you can see, we've got a lot of color and texture going on here. And then for fruit, I actually wanted dried cherries, but Heidi didn't have any dried cherries. So you just kind of work with what you can find. So these are just dried blueberries. And what I like about this, you've got the saltiness of the Kalamata olives, and the blueberries will add a little bit of sweetness, and I'm gonna just throw those in over here. And then we're gonna top it off with a little lemon tahini vinaigrette. This is just lemon, tahini, and you threw me off with my 1 minute, so I'm trying to hurry. Just some lemon and tahini and salt and pepper and a little bit of honey. And then the last thing I'm going to add are some pistachios. So I'll throw that in. This will be back at the table as well if any of you guys want to try it later on. So thanks for listening, and I hope you'll consider trying some plant-based recipes. There's so many resources out there and really easy to find. Thanks for listening.
All right, thank you so much, Angela. All right, so next we have Kelsey Massengale to talk about water quality.
I did not bring any yummy looking treats, so sorry about that. Hard act to follow. All right. So, as mentioned, my name is Kelsey Massengale. I'm with Partners of Scott County Watersheds. We are, of course, in Scott County, just a neighbor away, but this is a issue that extends far beyond political borders. So appreciate you listening here and hope to make this quick. I misinterpreted the agenda and made this for the breakout session, which is a little bit longer, so I'm going to try and go fast through it. So quick, Partners of Scott County Watersheds, as I mentioned, we're based out of Scott County. We are a nonprofit organization. It kind of started as a loose alliance between some municipalities in the area after some concerns of flooding and just general water quality with that. And so it's now blossomed into this separate organization that is still supported by the different municipalities and county government in Scott County. I'm the only employee, but I have a strong board behind me. So we do a number of things, but these are kind of our main pillars. So we primarily focus on education with opportunities like this. We do school programs. We host forums and workshops. We also provide technical assistance to landowners, ag producers, municipalities, student researchers, all kinds of groups. We do water quality monitoring, right? That's kind of an obvious, it's a given. So not only do I monitor a select site or a select group of sites on my own, but we also host 3 times a year a citizen science opportunity where anybody who's interested can learn how to monitor water quality and then get to go out in the field for a day and actually monitor about 5 to 7 sites and collect all this really great data, which we then use to help kind of focus our efforts. And then finally, we have a series of volunteer opportunities, not only with these water quality monitoring events, but we do a lot of trash cleanups and a lot of invasive species removal and habitat improvement days. So for those who may be unfamiliar with what water quality actually is, I always want to throw that in here. So water quality is essentially the health of water for a particular use. So there are different water quality requirements for drinking water versus recreational fresh water. So when we look at water quality, we're not looking at it necessarily for drinking purposes. We're looking at it for the health of the environment. And we do that by focusing on a couple different components. So we look at the physical parameters, which would include like the color and the odor. Hopefully there's none. We look at the chemical parameters like pH and chloride and nitrates. And then we look at some of the biological characteristics. You know, what's living in this stream? What is this, or creek or lake, whatever it is, what is this body of water supporting? And I also want to throw in a bit about a watershed, because that's a term that's not familiar to everyone, although we all live in one. So a watershed is kind of a drainage basin. That's another that's a synonymous term. So in Scott County, there are 21 of these smaller Huck 12s that they're called watersheds. So I'm not familiar with how many are in Muscatine County. I meant to look that up, but it's been a crazy week, folks. But a watershed is essentially this area of land, this giant bowl, in which all of the water in that area, whether it's precipitation, runoff, stormwater, which I guess is runoff, or groundwater, all feeds into a common outlet. So, like I said, lots here in Scott County, but if we're looking at it on a bigger scale, we're part of the Mississippi River watershed. So anything that happens in this shaded region all eventually finds its way to the Mississippi. And it's important that we have good water quality and healthy watersheds because they support strong communities. And it does that in, I'm not going to go through all these, but you can see a number of ways, right? I think we, as people who reside pretty closely to the Mississippi River, understand the importance of having healthy water and that connection to it. So I'm not going to go too in depth. You guys know what I'm talking about here. So there are, of course, threats. That's why we're here, right? Climate change, of course, is one, but some other threats include, right? We're pretty good perpetuators of that. So we've got things like pesticides and herbicides that are applied runoff into our streams. Trash, shown so nicely in this photo, find their way into the streams pretty easily. We've got things like animal waste, whether that be in an agricultural setting or urban setting with dogs. That's a big one. Urban runoff, things that we're doing in our cities, find their way, once again, into our streams. Other applicants on different types of land surfaces. And then we got things like sediments and industrial waste. I could probably list 12 more. There's lots of things that can pretty easily affect our water. And again, this is kind of more focused on Scott County because that's where we have all of our data, but this extends pretty far beyond. So some trends that we see that are a little bit more alarming is an increase in nitrates in both the rural and suburban watersheds. So a lot of time that's attributed to agricultural settings, things like your fertilizers, but people in community or in cities apply fertilizers as well. So it's not just a farmer issue. We also see a lot of rural streams becoming less transparent, so murkier. In particular, Duck Creek, which is actually an urban stream, is also seeing a decrease in transparency or an increase in its murkiness. We see more phosphorus, again, another fertilizer applicant in more of those rural areas. An overall increase in chloride, which is often attributed to road salts, and fecal matter, which again is probably from dog waste, hopefully not people. So I of course don't want to end on that kind of downer note because there are things that we can do, right? So you as an individual can do a number of different things. You know, we say that your actions within the watershed have a greater impact, right? What we do upstream affects those downstream. And so some of the things that I like to share that are pretty simple are to do trash cleanups. If you're going on a walk with your dog, take an extra plastic bag and pick up the trash that you see. You can do, if you have a stream or a creek in your yard, you can do some things to improve the health of that, whether it's leaving a buffer strip or maybe ensuring that you're not contributing to erosion back there. I could go into that pretty in depth if you'd let me. Habitat is super important both for the greater good of the climate, but also for water quality. Rain gardens are becoming increasingly more popular, and they're a great way, if you have like a wet spot in your yard, to not have to mow that anymore. So that's an extra bonus. You can use rain barrels. I know I have one, and my house plants even love that. And of course, you can take this information today and share it. Keep growing the knowledge within our communities about these issues. You can also, of course, join the efforts of our organization. So like I mentioned, we do a lot of different things, and we try to, involve as many people in the community as possible. So we do, like I said, lots of volunteer events. They slow down, of course, this time of year as it gets chillier, but we do have some fun fall and winter projects coming up. You can join us for a snapshot, one of those volunteer water quality monitoring days. Those will pick up back in the spring of next year. We host lots of workshops where you can come and learn more, like you're doing here today. You can follow us on Facebook as well. We share a lot of information both about the events that we're hosting, but ways that you can make an impact too. And as we know, information on social media travels fast and far, so you can help spread that word. And I can't leave without saying you can help donate to our causes too. We got lots of projects, and as a nonprofit, funds are important. So that's my mini spiel. Thank you all for listening. Again, sorry I didn't bring fun snacks, but hope to talk to you some more. Thank you.
All right, so next up we have Jim LaRue to talk to us about citizen action. And since I do not have a PowerPoint for Jim, then I'm going to put up some contact information from our speakers.
Thank you for the invitation to speak. I see familiar faces in some instances and also some new people. I'm an attorney in Iowa City. For the first 23 years of my practice, a large part of what I did was railroad law, representing a number of Iowa-based railroads in their litigation and other practices. The governor of the state of Iowa, Chet Culver, asked me to be his general counsel and chief of staff. So I closed my practice and went to the governor's office. It was during the overlap of that 4-year period that a new railroad initiative was announced by the Obama-Biden administration, which had to do revitalizing passenger rail. We formed an organization in the upper Midwest, and I was the governor's representative to that meeting. There's a word I want you to think about today. The word is epiphany. Epiphany it can be a religious word, but more important to me is certain moments in your life with a sudden clarity in an unexpected way, you see the world differently and importantly. I had such an experience while serving on as the governor's representative to this Upper Midwest Coalition meeting we met quarterly. This meeting was in Columbus, Ohio, and a gentleman came up who I'd seen in the audience in our various meetings in different states, but I had not met. In the minutes before the meeting started, he came and assumed a chair next to me and said, Jim, my name is David Ewing. We haven't met, but I wondered if your Iowa ears were burning this week. Didn't know what it meant. I said, no, David, what's going on? Ends up, the man is a rather remarkable policy analyst, serving the Obama administration in a number of ways, but he was talking about a meeting a few days before while in Amsterdam, had been meeting with a group of international financial operators who were there surveying the globe for investment opportunities. He happened to be an advisor to the British royal family in that context, and his job was to go to these quarterly meetings to advise the British royal family as to whether he had seen or observed things that would be of interest to them in their investments. You had the Saudi family, you had the European banks, you had David Ewing, U.S. citizen, sitting in the background advising the British royal family, and he's asking me whether I had burning ears from something that had happened a few days before in Amsterdam. No, David, I have no idea what you're talking about. What he told me was that at some level of depth at that meeting, they had talked about investment opportunities in the state of Iowa in Jasper County, and it was down to the granular level of square footage available in warehouse spaces. Why in the world would a group like this be talking about Iowa? And he explained it to me, and this was my epiphany. I'm a lifelong chauvinistic Iowa person who thinks Iowa does things better than most, even when we don't. But that's how I feel about things. What he told me was that Iowa, there was plentiful quantities of what the world viewed as scarce resources, and going forward would be increasingly scarce. We have access to potentially clean water. We have access to 4 major railroads going east and west. We, on either side of us, have the largest freshwater rivers. Our air is relatively clean. Our population is relatively well educated. We are diverse and dispersed in our population. For those worried about pandemics, that's important. The likelihood of us being wiped out by a pandemic is statistically less likely than other population centers where most of the American economy to now has been growing, the bi-coastal. He says, Jim, you don't get it, but Iowa has in plentiful supply that which the world covets. And so they're looking at Iowa to put down their roots. That moment, I've not looked at Iowa the same way. But when we were thrown out unceremoniously of the governor's office only a couple of years later, we had elections still, and that's fine. I was left without a job, and I thought, okay, back to private practice, what am I going to do? I decided for a variety of reasons that I had seen in the governor's office that were new to me, that what maybe could be used as advocacy in environmental law. We have very few environmental lawyers going up against polluters. That's just part of our culture now. I got a call in May 2011 from a group of citizens in the city of Muscatine who at that point knew that he had an air quality problem, didn't know quite what to do with it. They were going door to door to try to raise consciousness. They called themselves CLAM, but they were not yet organized. I came down, we had a meeting in a local park, could hardly breathe the air. This group formulated in a more formal way a legal organization. We helped them to do it. That's one thing lawyers can do, a nonprofit organization, CLAM. They, in turn, filed an intervention petition in a proceeding between the Attorney General of the state of Iowa and Grain Processing Corporation. Became enormously beneficial to have them involved as a citizens group. The result of that proceeding was that GPC agreed to make $100 million of improvements to the manufacture of these products. They create world-class products at GPC, but they were doing it in a way that was environmentally more harmful than it needed to do. They also started a class action litigation. 18,000 members of the class in the south end of Muscatine, and only this week are we finishing up finding the last 2 juveniles who are entitled to compensation, but we needed to figure out their family structure before we could award the money. More than a decade later, what do you have? You have a manufacturing plant that still is creating world-class products, and it will for generations if they do things right. You have a group of employees that are well compensated, highly skilled, but they're also manufacturing things in a way that is less polluting and less harmful to the environment. Now, what is the deal here? The deal is Muscatine is the face, potentially, of exactly the kinds of things that these financiers in Amsterdam in 2009 were looking at. You have a community that's on the Mississippi River, one of the great rivers of the world. You have infrastructure here, good schools, you're educating good people, you have an art museum, you have proximity to the large cities, but you have a smaller town base. What the world covets and wants is what you have here. And the question for you is, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? We have a way of looking at history in sort of 2 widely different ways. One is we have large armies battling each other, and the victory or the loss determines the future of history. We have the great people, great men and great women at the right time in history making great speeches and bending the course of history. I get that. Most of history that's meaningful to me is made by tiny bands of moral pioneers who decided, locking arms with a neighbor or two, to change history in some meaningful way. And it begins to have a ripple effect. A pebble thrown into a pond becomes something different as it goes out. Who knows out of a group like this what will come? But it will be a missed opportunity if you don't at least think about it. Isn't there something I can do a little differently? Can I do more of it if I do it with a neighbor or a friend? And why can't the great changes that should be before us, why can't it start in a place like Muscatine, Iowa? I don't know why not. In fact, I would say it should, and it must, and it will. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, next we have Craig Mosier on energy districts.
Thank you, Zach. And thank you, everyone. This is What a great meeting, huh? How about this? There are over 40 people here gathered to talk about climate and the environment and stuff this morning on a Saturday morning. All right. And I'm going to talk to you about one of the opportunities that Jim was talking about that we could get involved in doing here. So I'm Craig Mosher. I grew up in Iowa City. I'm a social worker. I worked at a number of agencies around eastern Iowa. I taught at Iowa and up at Luther College in Decorah. Did a lot of sustainability work up there and got real interested in how to make that all happen. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how clean energy districts can make an impact. But let me just tell you, I retired from Luther, moved back to Iowa City because I had 4 kids and grandkids, 11 grandkids, and just love having time with them. And I've been working with energy districts since I was up at Luther, and I'll tell you about how that all happened. But I'm here to talk with you about the possibility of taking some of these issues and forming an energy district here in Muscatine County to work on climate change and energy kinds of issues. So we'll talk about that. So let's see. Let me get control of this here.
Just press right and left on that. Maybe if you point it at one of the projectors.
Back there.
Huh. That's right. I can just click through it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's back up to the first one.
First one?
Yeah. Or the second one. Okay. So what is a clean energy district? So clean energy districts are county organizations, nonprofits, created to strengthen local communities by leading and accelerating the transition to local clean energy. So everybody can benefit. We're in a transition to clean energy. We're moving away from fossil fuels towards using more of the renewable fuels. And clean energy districts can help us do that. So clean energy districts work in homes and businesses, doing energy efficiency work to make buildings more efficient, and like insulating and weatherizing things, and then doing renewable energy, installing solar, in some cases geothermal. We also do some advocacy and public education. The next slide. So you've all heard, I think, about the Inflation Recovery Act, this big new federal legislation that is going to provide tremendous resources to develop clean energy in the United States. And it provides tax credits and rebates for electric cars, for appliances, for efficiency upgrades to homes and businesses and churches and schools. So we can do things like electrifying nearly everything over the next 20 years. This is the key to solving the climate change problem, is electrifying everything that we can, which will cut fossil fuel use almost to zero over a 20-year period and reduce carbon emissions. So we're talking all electric cars and trucks, small trucks, okay? Lots of charging stations everywhere, just like gas stations are now. Heat pump furnaces and air conditioning instead of natural gas furnaces and our existing air conditioning units. Heat pump water heaters replacing natural gas. Also, I hate to tell you some of the cooks, but the gas stoves are going to have to go gradually, and we're going to be using electric stoves more, and we can talk about that. But there's some indoor air quality problems with gas stoves that are causing asthma for kids and stuff. Energy efficiency is going to happen for everyone. We're going to have to make all of our homes and business buildings and everything, schools and churches, much more energy efficient than they are, better insulated and so forth. and particularly people who are what we call energy burdened, folks who are low income, who pay a disproportionate percentage of their income for energy, which they can't really afford sometimes. And then locally owned solar and wind energy generation, we're going to generate much more of our energy from solar and wind. Also geothermal, some nuclear probably. Okay. So there are a couple of key problems that are going on. One in the economic area, we all know we're struggling right now, right? With high inflation, wages haven't kept pace, and things are not really doing very well economically. Outside of Muscatine, we've got investor-owned utilities that most of their energy profits go to out-of-state investors. You are really fortunate in Muscatine City to have a municipal utility that keeps some of that energy money local. That's a huge advantage to folks here in Muscatine. Now, on the environmental side, I don't need to tell you, our communities have been devastated by climate change. We've got wildfires out west with all the droughts. We've got flooding in the Midwest and other places from these intense storms. We've got derechos, we've got tornadoes and hurricanes and sea level rise and loss of biodiversity, the whole 9 yards, right? That's all happening. This is a kind of a lose-lose situation. One of the solutions is clean energy districts, which creates a win-win for the economy and for the environment. Okay? So we call this green meets green. There we go. So on the one hand, you've got clean energy work generating a lot of business for local contractors to do this weatherization work, to install these solar panels, to put in the power that's needed to make these things work. At the same time, we're stewards of the climate. And so we are helping to reduce the problem of climate change. At the same time, our communities are prospering from all of this work that we're going to be doing in the next 20 years. So we pay less for energy. That leaves more for family and business needs, makes a stronger community and a better world for all of us. So there's three drivers that strengthen our communities. The first one I talked about, electrifying everything. Stay with me on this, because we can do this. And if we reduce the use of fossil fuels almost to zero and replace those with renewable energy like solar and wind, some nuclear, some hydro and so forth, we actually are cutting our energy costs. It'll be cheaper to use renewable energy than it is now to use coal. We're replacing natural gas in homes, replacing gasoline in cars with electricity over a 20-year period. And this is, if we don't do this, we're not going to be able to stay under the 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius that they all tell us we have to stay under to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So we need to reinvest those energy dollars that we're saving by doing this and create green jobs in our communities. Electricians, plumbers, carpenters, all of these folks are going to be making money installing these clean energy, energy efficiency and renewable energy things. And we make this available to everyone at reasonable prices. That frees up money in the local economy to spend in other businesses. And that money circulates in the local economy, as you know. So we include everyone, we electrify everything, and we decarbonize electricity. Can this work for everywhere, for everyone? Well, let's look at that. There's a model we call universal local. Soil and water conservation districts are the model for energy districts. You remember during the Depression, back in the 30s, we had a tremendously depressed economy. We also had huge problems with the Dust Bowl and soil erosion, windstorms. Again, a kind of perfect storm of economic and environmental issues that came together. Green meets green, okay? The solution at the time was soil and water conservation districts. And you've got one here in Muscatine County, right? Some of you probably know about that. So these are local, voluntary, county-based organizations that provide local technical assistance. They're quasi-governmental. They get some federal support. And there are 3,000 of these around the United States. 3,000 counties in the United States. They all have soil and water conservation districts. Okay? So this is a universal local model. It's universal because the same model works in all these counties, but it's local because local people drive it in each county and make the decisions about how those soil and water conservation projects or how these energy projects will happen. It works because there are energy champions everywhere. And in this room, there are some of you who are going to be energy champions going forward, leading this work. Okay. Let me just tell you the story about the Winneshiek Energy District, which began back in 2008. This was the first one in Winneshiek County up in Decorah. You may remember in 2008, we had huge floods in eastern Iowa, all right? And this was all related to global warming and the use of fossil fuels that have put this heat blanket around the planet, right, that's trapping the air, trapping the heat, resulted in a lot of that rainfall. And so we also had a recession in 2008 because of the subprime mortgage crisis. So we had, again, this perfect storm of economic and environmental crises coming together. Green meets green. Well, a group of us started meeting over coffee in Decorah and talking about this. And what could we do about this? And we came up with the idea of, well, what if we used the model from the soil and water conservation districts and tried to apply that to energy issues? So we started doing home energy audits and giving a report to the homeowner about we did some minor air sealing and a little bit of insulation and stuff for people, but we gave them a report with a blower door test to tell them what they could do to improve their energy efficiency and what they could do in terms of renewable energy if they wanted to consider putting solar on their roof or in their yard. And we started doing that with the help of Green Iowa AmeriCorps teams. The AmeriCorps provides young people to do this kind of work. And what happened was that a lot of people started doing this. And we had some funding from the Recovery Act of 2009 that came out of that recession that funded these energy improvements. And so a lot of people got this work done. And we stimulated the local economy. Okay, contractors started getting paid to do this work because homeowners realized the need to do it. And now the Inflation Recovery Act is going to provide a similar jumpstart to provide some of the economic resources that we need to do this kind of work. So that's how the Winneshiek Energy District got started. How is it going now? Well, we now have 10 energy districts around the state, most of them in northeast Iowa, one over in Polk. We're working on starting 4 more right now, and this is one of them. And there's one in Wisconsin in Vernon County, and there's some folks up in Minnesota that want to start one. And we're talking with the feds about using this model to implement the Inflation Recovery Act nationwide. So we'll see what happens from that. But we're part of a larger movement. So the first step is to organize a diverse and passionate group of people who want to make this happen, okay? And hopefully we'll have a chance at the breakout to talk about beginning that process. So there are lots of champions. Yes, thank you. These are just some pictures of some of the meetings that happen around the state. And the next energy districts can do a lot of things. Iowa City has recently bought 3 new electric buses. There are charging stations going in all over northeast Iowa now. Farmers, interestingly enough, are an excellent market for solar, because think about how much energy farms use, right? And confined animal feeding operations are great places for solar, and a lot of farmers have been putting those in. So we've been helping folks do that with the help of REAP loans and REAP funding from the government. So there are lots of these kind of things happening. One case in point is in Marquette, up in northeast Iowa. The city has worked on a number of projects here, and let me just show you the next one, a slide of how this has worked out in Marquette. And I won't go through all these numbers, but if you look at the right-hand column, the city of Marquette invested about $430,000 in putting solar on 4 of their key facilities. They are going to save $1 million over the 25-year lifespan of those solar panels. This was a no-brainer for the city council in Marquette, okay? These numbers are just persuasive. The return on investment is about 11%, payback was about 10 years, and they have got those facilities. After that 10-year payback, notice, because the fuel is free, the cost of electricity is practically zero. Just the maintenance is the only real cost at that point. That's the beauty of solar. After that initial payback period, when you've repaid the investment to build it, it takes money up front to do it, which is what the federal tax credits and rebates are going to help with. But after that 10-year payback, the sun and the wind are free fuel for electric generation, all right? That's why it's cheaper to do renewables than it is to use coal-fired or fossil fuels, because the price of fossil fuels goes up, right? Mid-American tells us to expect at least a 4% increase every year. Some places it's more than that. That doesn't happen with solar and wind, because your fuel price is zero. Okay. So another implementation example in Elkader, there was a business building that had a flower shop and a pharmacy in it. They replaced 225 light fixtures with LED fixtures. And they invested $15,000, and I'm sorry, they invested 25, and they had a rebate from the utility of 15, which was an unusual help, but still, they're now saving $900 a month on their electric bill compared to what they were paying before with the old lighting fixtures. And the payback period was only about 10 and a half months. After that, that $10,000 a year that they save in electricity, think what that means to small businesses. Okay? This is real dollars that help the bottom line. Okay. Another example, in terms of jobs and so forth, this is a chart of solar installations in Clayton County. But let me tell you my experience from Decorah. When we first started working in Decorah, there was one guy, sort of a hippie kind of guy, installing occasional solar panels for friends and stuff around the county. Now, all 6 electric companies are actively installing solar, and one of them is actually buying solar panels by the semi-truckload at this point. Decorah has the highest per capita solar production in the country, partly because of the work of this energy district in selling people on doing this work. But think what that does for the local economy. All of those contractors doing all of this work stimulate the local economy, and that helps everybody, right? Because that money, because it's local, stays in the economy. So another thing that we do as energy districts is advocacy work. Probably some of you know about net metering, so that you can get the same price from your utility for solar that you put back onto the grid that you pay for. That law was challenged, and we actually got it codified into Iowa law, partnering with Iowa farmers and the solar industry. It was actually the pork producers of Iowa who pushed this through the legislature, frankly, okay, because they needed it for their facilities. And now we have net metering codified for the next 10 years in Iowa. That's a huge benefit to people that install solar. We also lobbied federal legislators about, they were trying to repeal the renewable tax credits that were helping people buy electric cars and so forth. And the Inflation Recovery Act now includes all that and more, partly as a result of that lobbying. We also had a problem here in Iowa, people that had installed solar expecting a 15% state tax credit for doing that, found out that the state didn't fund that the last year. And so there were a lot of them, we're not going to get their money, and we succeeded in getting that restored in the state budget. So 1,300 Iowa taxpayers are going to get the $5 million that they were expecting. So what we're trying to do is clean power for everybody. Let's think about how this could work in our own community, and we'll talk about this in the breakout if you want to come and do that. I'll just close by quickly mentioning some of the stuff that's in the Inflation Recovery Act that we can talk more about later. Tax credits for renewable energy, 30%, solar, wind, geothermal, battery storage is included for 10 years. You need tax liability, but you can carry that forward for different tax years. Schools and churches and municipals can get a direct pay program even though they don't pay taxes. There's an electric vehicle tax credit is being extended. $7,500 for new, $4,000 for used. Energy efficient home improvements, tax credits, whole house rebates up to $8,000, and high efficiency, there's a whole act for low and moderate income households. Some can get up to 100%. So that's a game changer. You know, that's going to help fund a lot of this work. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you, and it's exciting to see this happening in Muscatine. So, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Craig. All right, so in about 10 minutes, we're going to meet in our breakout session. So if you would please head to those locations based on what you would like to listen to. I'll put up a slide that shows the locations and where each presenter is going to be. One quick change is that Angela Woodhouse is going to stay in this area. So if you want to learn more about vegan and vegetarian diets, please stay here. Otherwise, refer to the slide to see where you ought to go. All right, so we'll be in our breakout sessions for about 20 minutes. So going from about 11:20 to 11:40 is when we'll be there. We will reconvene here at 11:45 to discuss what we talked about in our breakout sessions. Are you talking about the food? Okay, so we do have refreshments on that back table across from the desks that are caged in right now. If you'd like to get some refreshments, we have some material over here, some displays at these tables if you want to grab some information from some of the individuals who brought information here today. And then we'll reconnect at 11:45. All right, thank you. Would anyone like to discuss their talking points from Angela Woodhouse's breakout session? Anything that was important, stuck out to you in your direction moving forward?
Food is delicious.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I'm fortunate enough to have Angela in my family, so it's nice to have food regularly. Oh, thank you.
So there should be 3 or 4 or 5 other reporters coming forward, we hope. We did the water quality, and we had more questions, we had answers. What do we want to see in the future? Clean water. It's the only time when you don't want green in your title, is green water isn't good, sorry. We need to identify existing wetlands because they seem to be shrinking up and disappearing, so an inventory of wetlands. We need a listing for simple practices for farmers and urban dwellers that can be quickly implemented to reduce herbicide, pesticide, fertilizer runoff. And what do we want to work on? Is there a water testing program in Muscatine County? Does anybody know?
I have a question. I think Walton League is really good with their SOS. Do they do that with this ice? Does anyone know with this one in particular? But I've heard that with citizen science groups elsewhere, so I didn't know.
And it's a really great program that exists. I know there's not a hub here in the state. I don't know if there's already groups that utilize it.
And a website we'll publish that you might all want to check out that Kelsey was highly recommending was one word, modelmywatershed.org. And it's a whole United States, but you can pin it down to your neighborhood and it shows where the water comes from and who the users are. So that's it.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so next up is Craig Mosier's room. I documented a little bit. Unfortunately, I was also running around solving tech problems. So if anyone else has anything that they want to say from that talk, I could certainly go over what I heard. But if anyone else has any other information, yeah.
There's a big debate now around the state. There's a big debate around the state about using these CSR ratings for the fertility of the land, basically, as a way of determining whether you can put solar or not on it. And it turns out that according to a lot of the research, it's actually not a very good way of measuring the choice that the farmer needs to be making. And that the solar actually takes a very small percentage of tillable land. And so the CSR rating is really not a very good measure for that. But I know that some counties have been looking at that as a way of making these decisions. And that's going to be a very active political discussion next year about which counties are going to use that and which are not. Yeah.
So would that be something that needs to be solved at the legislative level and codified as law, that farmers need to have the autonomy to do what they want to do on their own?
It's a good question. Does this need to be a state legislative decision? And my guess is it's probably going to be. And so I think we're going to need to encourage the legislature to let each county make its own choice about this and not to impose one model. Unless that model is to let farmers make their own decisions, then that's fine. But I don't think we want the state telling farmers what they can do with their land. That's just my opinion.
What they can or what they cannot do.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
I don't know, John or Gage, do you want to report a little bit on what we talked about?
Just to
One of my big questions for Craig was, how would that work with MPW as a municipal utility? We're doing a lot of the things that Craig talked about in his presentation, we're doing energy efficiency audits and working with customers, so just making sure we don't, duplicate, those kind of efforts. And so, as Jessica was saying, MPW is still focused on MPW customers, there could be a focus on more rural, other parts of the county. But it's one of the great things about having a municipal utility is, that focus on Muscatine, and we bring that to the table every day for our customers. So if you have any interest in any of those things, talk to MPW customers, obviously.
So yeah, we're really hoping that other folks may get interested in this group. So Gage and Jessica, John and Jessica set up the next meeting, and then we will invite everybody who's here, and you can talk to other folks that you know who may get involved.
Yep.
John, you know a lot of folks here.
Yeah, we'll send out some invites with the email list that we're generating here when we determine the next meeting for the energy district kickoff, I guess, if you want. So, hope everybody shows up in a big group there.
I will be happy to attend the first few meetings, just to sort of provide a little history and so forth. But we did this in Lynn County, and I went to 4 or 5 months of meetings, and then they were off and running and doing their own thing, and it's terrific. That's the way they start. So I think we've got a good start. I am very pleased that you've got a municipal utility here already. Decorah, we tried really hard to start one. As some of you may know, we came within 13 votes of getting it done. So we're going to try again, because then the community has much more control over the kind of energy and the way that it's used. And you're already halfway there. So Muscatine is a wonderful county to be working in this way. Thank you all.
Awesome, thank you. If I could have someone from Jim LaRue's group.
Jim's group was Citizen Action. I'm Jean Clark, and I'm reporting for now. I'm temporarily group leader. We may see what else comes out. Our discussion, we didn't really get to what do we want to see in the future and what do we want to work on. We didn't have real specifics because we were talking a bunch about economic development, the wonders of being in Muscatine, and the fact that, yeah, in terms of an energy district, we have our own utility company, and what the advantage that that gives us and what we can do within that structure. We're talking about related to that attitude is a big thing, that if we in our own community have the attitude that this is the place, this is a good place to be. And so related to that, we talked a little bit about workforce and what does it take to attract 20 to 40-year-olds. We had the idea of, we could be a model city for redeveloping the south end. The air is cleaner there. The land values should increase. There should be more investment. Do we put solar on the houses down there as a way of saying, we can... There was just a bunch of brainstorming. But we also acknowledge that at this point, especially with everyone who's trying to make this transition, storage is a big issue. The technology isn't there yet. We're still waiting for it to come. We don't have a specific goal that we're working on or what we're going to do. We did talk about, we had the question of, are there things, because the city is writing their 10-year comprehensive plan, is getting ready to do that, are there things that community members can do to talk to city council members that would help MPW in their green effort energy, programs? And so that's kind of where we ended. Yep. I was going to say, I know CLAM has, I'm also on the CLAM board, and we have sent some information to the schools, and we've, had a couple of messages. We haven't met with any school officials. We've exchanged some emails and some stuff like that. There recently was money for electric school buses that, and I don't know if the school board applied for any of it here in Muscatine or not, so. Yes.
I just wanted to respond, Shelley. So these tax credits that are available, the time limit is like ending soon, so action needs to be taken. Like, I'm not sure, the what? I don't know if that's it. No, I don't believe so. But there is on our website, the Progress Muscatine website, there is a video about these tax credits and how the city, government, and public facilities or large nonprofits can use these tax credits. So if you want more details, you can go to our website, Progress Muscatine, and there's a little video about how schools and public facilities can use these tax credits. And I just need to impress upon you, the time is like ending, so it needs to be done sooner than later if the city's going to take advantage of this, or if entities within the city should do.
Did you have a question, Craig?
Just a comment about battery storage. Actually, we are now at the point where large developers are planning to install batteries as part of the big solar projects. And an example is the Next Era project at the Palo nuclear plant up north of Cedar Rapids. They're putting in a 100 megawatt solar project, a huge solar project. And they're going to put battery storage in as part of that. So I think the numbers are beginning to work now at that scale for doing battery storage. So we're crossing kind of over to where it's cost effective to do it.
And I'll just put in, I think we have a meeting on Thursday, November 17th, 6:30, and I think some of these subgroups, I hope we'll all meet back together and maybe we can coalesce into one particular group, and some specific things we're going to work on is kind of the hope. Okay?
All right, thank you. So now if I can get someone from Kelsey Massengale's group. Oh, you already did, I'm sorry. Okay, so someone from Pam Joslin's group.
Okay, I'm Ann Mays, and I went to Pam's breakout session, and some of the questions that we would like to have answered or get more information on would be, how can we get younger kids, adults, and families to do the project that John and Pam have been working on with the school systems and recycle, getting those recycle bins to everyone if we possibly could get something there. And then how to monitor, or what kinds of educational materials we can get out so that we can monitor what goes into those bins. Ways to do curbside, not, going ahead and getting all of that, and access to hours of the transfer station out to the public as far as when they are. I know you have something out for that right now as far as when the transfers open, right, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. But, maybe just reiterate that to lots of people who are around, so that the ideas get, you've always heard, the more that you say it, the more that somebody will recognize that. And, let's see. Pam, do you have?
Just another one, maybe even prior to curbside, Chris had brought up a really good point. Is there a way to store it at different places in the community before we go to an actual curbside, and maybe have a key code for people to access that? Because I was describing, like, when I lived in Finland for a couple of years, we, in our apartment storage, had different recycling for all of those bins, and so that way you can limit the access of just anybody going into there and saying, hey, I want to do this, but they also have to be knowledgeable, so you're not putting glass, for example, into the bio waste. And so it might be a way, because I know there was a problem on Washington Street with just whatever was thrown in those recycling units. Is there a way to have some type of storage that's a little more limited, but also available?
Yeah, the program actually started in Minneapolis and tried it out, and what I was planning on doing, or hopefully getting something started, is to have, you would have to sign up and get a text from me, from us, from the city, that gives you a code in order to get into that bin. Because if you just set a bin out, it's gonna get filled with trash and everything else like that. If you're motivated enough to sign up for a program, you get a text that tells you what that code is, and you can get into it. And we can set these out at IVs or different places where people actually are going. Curbside is a great idea, and I would encourage an entrepreneur to start that program. They can, you know, give you the bin, they can come pick it up at your house, they can drop it off at the transfer station, weigh themselves, we'll charge them a fee. They can charge the person who's dropping it off a fee, and that's the start of a new little business in town. I'm not sure that the city itself is motivated to do that at the moment. I mean, we're having troubles of our own just doing the things that we are doing now. So that's kind of where I would say curbside should go, is some entrepreneurial person start a business and start promoting that, you know?
Awesome. Am I?
By the way, come put your name in here and you can win this free bin. Before I go, before I have a 1 o'clock I have to get to, so you have to do it.
All right. Am I missing any groups? It seems like I'm jumping around a little bit. Any groups I haven't called upon? Okay, the electric vehicle. Thank you. Electric vehicles. Does anyone, from anyone?
We were enthusiastic, but then we were just talking on an individual level, that they're fun to drive. They're not that hard, what Chuck said's true. We didn't go past that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, fair enough. Yeah.
I'd just like to say that Angela Woodhouse's food is great. If you haven't tried the chili, it's over on the refreshment table, and so is the Buddha Bowl, and don't miss it.
All right, well, thank you. So if I could have everyone who worked on this committee to stand up really quick to just give them a quick round of applause for all the work that they have put into this meeting. Awesome, thank you. Oh, well, thank you. You know, we really appreciate that you came out on your Saturday to come to this event. We really appreciate our guest speakers for presenting today. I often hear when I attend voluntary meetings, whether it's to improve the college, the community, the state, or the country, or even the globe, that someone inevitably remarks, it takes a special kind of person to spend their time, energy, and resources to make their community or world a better place. And I think that's absolutely true of the people who are attending here today. We are currently experiencing a global climate crisis, and this is undeniably caused by humans. And this is hence why our current epoch is suggested to be called the Anthropocene, or the era of man, due to the negative impact that we've had on our planet. Average global temperatures are rising, storms are becoming more frequent and severe. The extinction rate of species, whether that be plants, animals, fungi, you name it, has increased at least tenfold, and we are losing polar ice caps, which is also accelerating the rate of global climate change, among a plethora of other global climate issues. And according to the tragedy of the commons principle, everyone assumes that they can take and use and abuse and deplete resources to benefit themselves, because they believe that their single contribution to a problem can't have a catastrophic effect. But when everyone does that, the effect is cumulative, and we've already seen the consequences of this type of mentality, and we will continue to see the consequences of this type of mentality for at least the next few decades. But there are signs of hope. More and more we are seeing individuals acknowledge the reality of global climate change. Individuals are making more environmentally friendly choices by taking on a vegan or vegetarian diet, driving electric vehicles, walking or riding their bikes to work, taking public transportation, and reducing consumption of goods, reusing reusable materials, and recycling what cannot be reused. And people like you showing up to events like this. So like I said, it takes a very special kind of person to use their time and energy and resources to come to an event like this and to be part of the solution. So let's walk away from here today choosing the long-term environmentally friendly solutions over the short-term conveniences. It won't always be the easiest option, and it won't always be the most glamorous option, and it won't always be the most popular option, but trust me, we'll thank ourselves in the future. All right, thank you.